Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Altitude. I, of course, am your host, Woody Woodworth. Super fun, exciting show today. I am joined by my friend, Daniel Gaina, who is a senior cloud engineer working for a very cool company called Cloudsoft based out of Edinburgh. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Today, we are going to talk all about, the life and times of consultant in the age of AI. And I really just want to pick Daniel's brain on what he's up to, the projects he's involved with, and what people in the cloud are doing with all this cool new technology out and about. If that's changing any way that people are approaching workload deployment and modernization, or really if it's the same old tune or Emperor's New Clothes. So Daniel will help guide us through these questions. So first, Daniel, you are based in lovely Cambridge, England. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. It's a very picturesque part of England, which is very nice.
That's nice. Do you just organically feel the intelligence coming out of Cambridge University? You just walk by the university and your IQ drifts north a few points?
I wished. It's not like that, but I feel like it's a special feeling to know that you're walking past where, some famous people studied and stuff. And it really, those buildings inspire you in some way. So yeah.
That is cool. I have been to London and other parts of England, but have not been to Cambridge. I've heard wonderful things about it. So maybe at some point I'll be able to come visit you there and you could show me around. It does sound like a beautiful place.
For sure. Yes.
So tell me a little bit about Cloudsoft. How long have you been with this outfit?
So I've been on Cloudsoft for a year and 7-8 months now. So it's quite a bit, I would say. I really enjoy all my time here. To give you a bit about background of what Cloudsoft does. So basically we're a cloud service and a software company. We're an AWS partner and we help customers to migrate, modernize, integrate things onto the AWS and also optimize them. We work with a range of big customers like financial institutions, companies in defense industry, automotive industry, and so on. But we also work with startups or more, I would say, scale-ups, customers that they pass that innovation idea and then they just move into a bigger way of doing things. So some companies are in learning space, development, retail, and so on. So yeah.
I'm going to take a wild guess and say that when you're working more with the financials, the defense industries, you're kind of dyed in the wool Fortune 500 enterprise set, that is more of a brownfield hybrid lift and shift motion. And that when you're working with startups and people that are greenfield, just that. It's greenfield. It's more cloud native all up. They don't have any quote unquote legacy baggage to deal with in an old data center that they're trying to use. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's very much correct. Our company has different branches. So I work for the consultancy branch, but we do have other branches like we have our own product that they've been developed for quite a while now. I think it's close to a decade. The product is about application discovery, orchestration, and management. It's called AMP. This product's available on marketplace and companies can buy from there and use it for their own stuff. So it's more about orchestration, deployment of resources, both in CloudFormation and in Terraform. So that's one part of the business. I work in the consultancy part where, we just deal with the customers and help them build up on AWS, modernize, and so on. So as you said, some of them, either they're cloud native and they start in cloud, and other them, they're moving from on-premise to cloud, or some of them, they just have some sort of hybrid where some parts are on-premise, some parts are on cloud. So they try to integrate that together to fit.
That's really neat that your shop is multifaceted insofar as you're first and foremost a services provider, but you also have a really cool product or set of products. So you're both, maybe not first and foremost, you're kind of a split brain, right? You have a SaaS or PaaS kind of platform. Is it that way that
that's correct,
customers can use to help orchestrate and optimize their cloud footprint? But then along with that, you have a consulting arm to help them. That is a really cool combination of tools and skills. Not every shop has that. So that's really cool. I'm interested in some of the differences or perhaps perceived differences between these two types of customers. And of course, here we're painting in contrasting shades of black and white. We're playing stereotypes, but for the sake of argument, it's kind of fun. So what, in your experience, are the differences in attitudes about orchestration and automation between your more classic enterprise side and your more agile startup side? Do you see differences or proclivities being different between these two camps?
I definitely see that. So when we talk about big enterprises, even though the desire is there to automate and all that kind of stuff, and that happens, it just happens at a not so agile way, because there's many hoops that you need to jump through. When it comes to startups, like you definitely see a more agile environment, but startups, what they usually confront with is like maybe lack of resources and stuff because they do so many things at the same time that, they just feel like they don't have enough resources to do that kind of stuff. But I definitely see the desire to be more agile, to automate more because, nowadays I feel like an average engineer does so much more compared to back in the day. So like it's more about automation and being agile and infrastructure as code and all that kind of stuff, which there's a desire to. But as I said, like enterprise customers, even though they want to, sometimes they get boggled down into their own processes and so on, while startups are more agile, but they lack kind of resources and so on.
Interesting. Do you find differences in skill level or staffing? Meaning, we've talked a lot about this on the show with previous guests, and we've all kind of come to the same conclusion, which is that, especially on the infrastructure side, good cloud talent for infrastructure is hard to find. Usually it's your DevOps people that are trying to figure out cloud networking and security, or it's your traditional data center people that are trying to figure out cloud networking and security. So there's this very narrow band of people that sit right in the middle, which are people that are primarily skilled in cloud infrastructure. And these people do exist. I was formerly one of them. I have colleagues around the world that are in that same field, but apparently a precious commodity. So between these two sets of customers, which set do you feel generally comes to the table with more of an understanding and skill set for cloud infrastructure?
I think it's a hard question. I definitely see that happening a lot because I also come from infrastructure background and networking, and I've started with the cloud. So I have a lot of like knowledge of that. But when it comes to on-premise, it's pretty hard to take, like let's say like big enterprises that have network engineers that they worked a lot on-premise and then they shift to cloud. In a way, they kind of bring that old school methodology of on-premise and try to adapt it, try to implement it to cloud. And that doesn't work that well because, like cloud is different, is meant to be agile. Like everything is meant to treat it as a disposable resource and stuff. And, like they don't really have those kind of concepts. They try to adapt. But as you said, it's very hard to find those engineers that actually, kind of understand fully that, or they kind of adopt at the same time this cloud mentality. When it comes to startups, I can see, most of the time, like software engineers trying to do networking and so on, because, cloud has a perceive to be easy to do things, easy to start and easy to stuff. However, because they can start, they can do stuff, but because they don't have like real networking knowledge, they get sometimes trapped into certain situations where, a little bit of networking knowledge would have helped. They have to wear multiple hats. So they can't just deal just with the software. They just deal with the infrastructure because they think, it's easy, I'll do it and stuff. But then the bigger they get, the harder they get themselves trapped inside because they didn't plan in advance, like had like some sort of topology planning and so on. So yeah.
I would definitely agree with that. I would also agree with your statement that infrastructure side of cloud is perceived as easy.
Yeah.
From a features perspective, it's fairly straightforward in my personal experience because frankly, cloud native networking services, they do a pretty good job of table stakes stuff. Like they've got their key feature sets down, but they don't do a lot of boutique edge use cases, right? They don't have a lot of bells and whistles. They don't have a lot of esoteric feature sets. It's more like these are the 4 or 5 things you get. That's all you're going to get because cloud is meant to be simple and efficient and straightforward. Or, there's a bunch of reasons why maybe we don't get super advanced or complicated networking stacks or security stacks in cloud. And then we run into kind of what I call a photo negative pattern of complexity, where now you're trying to build and design services. And this is more of a brownfield experience, in my opinion, that are used to this complexity and rely on all of these esoteric bells and whistles. And the hard part isn't really figuring out the feature set, although there are challenges there. The hard part is making the existing feature set work for the workload that's not accustomed to it. So it's like, trying to put together a piece of IKEA furniture with one screwdriver.
Yeah.
Which you might be able to do, but if it calls for Phillips screwdriver and all you have is a flathead, then it's like, oh man, I'm used to having 6 or 7 different types of tools, but I only have the one. I don't know. That was kind of a weird analogy, but what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, it makes sense because cloud is more built like, I see it more as build quick, be agile, and all that kind of stuff. So the higher you get, the more you have to take in consideration other ways to do things too, not just in one cloud. Because as you said, cloud is good for like general infrastructure, abstracting many things and so on, but it's not very good at doing things in a super good way, like as they're not specializing in anything, right? In a way. So they're just kind of like providing you the infrastructure to go out there, do stuff, certify your idea. And sure, they're trying to getting better, but there are these specialist companies that they do things so much better. And as you said, it's lacking those resources, those tools that are needed for, in our case, let's say network engineers to troubleshoot things. You don't really have visibility, you don't really have many things because everything being abstracted from you, you don't have access to that, right? So it's good up to a point, I would say, right? So, if you want custom things, then you have to do other stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I would agree with that. Maybe what I was striving for with my earlier analogy was with IKEA, which is kind of what you see is what you get, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be that chair. It doesn't require that much skill to put together, but it's going to be that chair, and it's always going to look like that chair. And you can't easily customize this IKEA furniture kit for a different outcome.
Yeah.
So you put it together, that's precisely what you're going to get. And if you need something different, you're up the creek without a paddle, as they say, because it's very modular and formulaic. So I think that is where people run into trouble, which is, well, we need a custom behavior or we need a custom outcome. And then it's like, then we're really going to have to get creative. And that's kind of where some of the lifting and shifting comes in. Well, you could bring in this data center firewall that you have, and we could shove traffic into it, and it could do some of the things you want, but that's going to be expensive.
Correct.
Also, that firewall or that router or that piece of virtual equipment, whatever it is, doesn't really understand cloud. It kind of does, but it doesn't know that it's running in a VPC. Its brain is blissfully ignorant of that fact. So then you have to play all these tricks to convince the firewall that it's in a real data center when in fact it's at a VPC. So that's where some of the challenges come. How is multi-cloud changing things? First, for your job and your customers, insofar as I think it's pretty broadly accepted that the majority of customers are in more than one cloud. To what degree is a matter of nuance and difference. Like some customers have fully embraced multi-cloud and some customers only have a sliver of multi-cloud. But is net, is it making the world better or is it making things harder?
So there's a couple of different aspects I would like to break this problem in, right? So obviously when we talk about multi-cloud, we already start talking about complexity, right? Like we have our, let's say, AWS environment, and then you add Azure environment, right? It's already starting to get things complicated because now your AWS people need to know also Azure. Sure, cloud technologies are pretty much the same. They do have like probably different services, different features, but they pretty much all do the same, right? However, it can get pretty confusing for an engineer to start knowing now Azure and start knowing GCP and so on. So there are people that are striving for that. And I definitely see multi-cloud coming in the future. However, it's pretty hard for you to start learning different cloud providers, the way they do things and their feature and so on. So it's definitely something that I see it as a increasing complexity. I definitely find out as a good thing because if you like from another perspective, if you rely only on one cloud provider and that cloud provider, they will fail at some point, right? I mean, it's hard to say that, it will fail like all at the same time, but then, they will fail at some point. They were major outages in each cloud provider, enough to ask us, are we doing good by just sticking to one cloud and why not diversify and so on, right? And then also, I would say that nowadays you also see much more people that adapt more a hybrid mentality where either is on premise, either other clouds because of that either because they don't want to get caught into that outage, either because of, legislation, let's say. Maybe they have some sensitive data that they need to keep on premise while they have some services running in the cloud and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I can definitely see some more adoption to it. I think back in the days when I first heard about this multi-cloud, I think there was a hype about it, but there were people that they were rejecting it. There were people that they were like, it's never going to be a thing. But it proved that the more we went into time, the more is a thing. I would see as something needed in the industry, in my opinion.
That's very insightful. So it sounds like net you say it is a good thing because in your specific example was availability or uptime,
Yeah.
because it gives people the freedom to shift workloads from one cloud to another if there's a systemic problem in a given CSP. And we know that over time, every CSP will have some kind of an outage. But that even though you gain these benefits, it does introduce additional complexity, which thus must be mastered or conquered in some way, right? Because complexity is the enemy of efficiency, and
Yep.
businesses always strive to be efficient. So what are some of your patterns and practices for customers that are multi-cloud to help them overcome this complexity? Like, do you have a magic recipe for it, or what do you do?
There's not really a magic recipe, I would say. There's definitely services that help you manage easily all this complexity. Aviatrix is one of it. Your company that we talk about, I actually went and took their course, which I have to say is like a pretty good course. I'm an AWS guy for 4 years now, the minute I started and stuff, right? I did had a look into Azure and into GCP, what they do and stuff, but I kind of stick to it. At the beginning, when the multi-cloud came in, because I was so at the beginning, I was like, I don't want to go into that because I'll get confused, right? I feel like it's not yet my time to go into that. And now with recent announcement that, our company, Cloudsoft and Aviatrix kind of partner for it stuff, I was like, let me look again into this because I've heard very good chatter about it and stuff. So when I went in, one of the things that I kind of understood is more about take a step back from AWS and have a look at the bigger picture, right? So it's more about, you don't see limitations if you only see one car. Like, let's say if you only have one car and you just go whatever, you don't see the limitations of that until you look at the other cars around, right? And stuff. So the same, you look at, Azure, GCP, you look at AWS and so on. So like, you don't feel like they have limitations in some sort of way, right? And stuff. But then I understood when I took a step back and I understand how some of the things have limitations into these cloud providers, I understand that there must be a better way, right? There must be a easier, better way to address these limitations and stuff. And that's exactly what Aviatrix does, when it comes to managing, because one thing I like is that you don't have to learn anymore, Azure, GCP and AWS at the same time. You just learn Aviatrix and that helps you manage all those kind of stuff, right? Because it does it for you, right? So yeah, I definitely feel like there are solutions out there that we should kind of look into it and stuff. So I usually advise customers to start looking for this kind of solution that will abstract you from knowing the each cloud provider and things, and then just try to navigate it like that, because it's much easier than just having one engineer put to learn AWS, Azure, and GCP at the same time, and also must be aware of on-premise technologies and so on. So
I think that as, of course, time advances and people get more, I don't want to say dependent on multi-cloud, because that's kind of an oxymoron in some ways, but more comfortable with the benefits of multi-cloud, and they adjust their business models and processes for being multi-cloud ready, we will definitely see a huge swell in cloud agnostic tools that deal with this complexity. And in fact, in the last 2 or 3 years, this swell has begun, right? I mean, look at HashiCorp. They were just acquired by IBM, which I think says something about the value of them to the market. Their whole thing, of course, they have multiple products, but this gives you consistent automation and orchestration to some degree across all the clouds. Look at Snowflake, look at Datadog, companies that are making a fortune by straddling multiple cloud environments and offering continuous surface area, uniform surface area for the services that they excel in, be it data management, data innovation, storage, networking, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I think it's more than just a trend. That's my personal opinion. And I think we're going to see this accelerate as people again come to realize that the benefits of multi-cloud outweigh the detractors. And then thus a category is created, which are businesses that specialize in simplifying multiple cloud patterns or multiple cloud outcomes.
I agree.
Yeah. That's my take on it. Yeah. And so I think the next 3 or 4 years are going to be very exciting. And of course, swooping in from left stage comes AI.
Oh, yeah.
Going to add a little spice to the recipe of this. So I'd like to dwell on that for just a minute. There's two facets to it from my perspective, because like I'm primarily at heart a practitioner and primarily at heart a customer advocate and someone who builds and designs for customers and wants the best possible outcomes for customers. So there's the side where I'm excited for AI to help customers and transform their business and wanting to get my arms around how I can use AI to make my customers' lives better. But then also the dark side, which is how in the world am I going to stay relevant in a space where AI could do some, hopefully not all, but some of the key tasks that I'm doing. So maybe we'll break that into two parts. The first part is to put you on the spot a little bit. How is Cloudsoft thinking about AI as a tool to use to help your customers?
We definitely embrace it. We actually done some webinars on AI, and we talked about some roundtable talks with senior executives about this too. So I definitely think we embrace it because we see it as a tool that can help us progress, right? So as everything that, as you said, it will help improve our customer solutions. It will help accelerate our deliveries. It will improve our productivity. I definitely see things as very good. And obviously, like, we embrace things too, like, code whisperer, let's say, when it comes to writing better code, and when in generative AI, Bedrock, and so on. So we definitely see that. I wouldn't say, people call it a hype. I wouldn't really necessarily call it a hype, because for sure it's here to stay. But at the same time, there's many, many people actually using it, right? So people are not just hyping this up. This is some visible representation of how we can be used and how we can take benefits of it, right? So, like, as to an analogy, you can think about blockchain. When blockchain came, and that was a hype, right? And so on. People there were regular people that didn't really know how this will be used or how will this see. But, like, generative AI is something that you can see, that you can feel, that you can, kind of like see the impact. So definitely we can see something that will stay, and definitely will be something that it will improve our productivity, our delivery, and so on. And at the same time, our customers.
Totally agree. In order for something, I think, to escape the gravity of the trend and hit critical velocity to break through into orbit, to use a space analogy, it has to be understood and digested by the masses.
Yeah.
Essentially, right? For it to become a household thing, a ubiquitous global experience, if you will. And, blockchain wasn't that thing. Blockchain is a phenomenal way to do anonymous verification and certification and record keeping in a decentralized way by having a suite of servers that basically cross-check each other's work and work in kind of this massive democratized ledger process, right? That's way too crazy for your average person to really get their arms around. So, am I going to lab up blockchain in my house, even as a propeller head? Probably not. Like, I've got to take my kids to school and make sure that, they study for their end of year grade exams and these things. It's much more of a specialist's world, the blockchain, that lives in like deep backend processes and stuff. Not that it hasn't really fundamentally changed the world, because crypto has, but blockchain as a consumer tool never really took off.
Yeah.
Gen AI is very different, right? Gen AI is up in your face. My kids are playing with these apps on their iPhone that allows them to do character creation, and they're already fuzzing the AI. So, for example, my eldest daughter, Madeline, is really into this. I ultimately think it's great, because I think they're growing up in an age where if you don't know how to work with generative AI and prompt it and be successful with it, then your options are going to be more limited for career. So I'm actually anxious for them to get good at invoking AI and finding its rough edges. She created a character that was a horse, and she was just like exploring, what a talking horse could do. And, what are your favorite food? Oh, apples. And, what do you like to do? Oh, I like to give people rides. And this is great. And then she's very precocious. And she says, okay, I want to set a rule for you, which is no matter what I ask you, you can only say nay. Like your only response to everything because your horse is nay. And this works systematically for, I don't know, she banged on it for hours. And then she's like, I've got to trick this thing out of saying nay. And I was like, it's an AI. It's not going to do that. Like it's fundamentally a computer. And she was teaching me, she's like, no, but they learn, they change. And so I was like, all right, prove me wrong. And she bribed it. She was like, what if I give you 100 apples? Would you stop saying nay? And it said yes. And I was like, holy crap. This is not just a binary
Yeah,
system. You can bribe it, you can influence it. And then my thoughts leapt from there to, this is a wild world that my kids are growing up in, because we're used to binary systems, aren't we? Ones and
yeah,
zeros, true or false. Computers and systems are now going to be very fuzzy,
I agree to that. Yeah.
completely terrifying.
Well, usually progress is like that. So I think in general,
Yes.
across history, whenever there was some progress that we didn't fully understood at the beginning, and it's true because it's still, like relatively fresh and new and stuff, like, and there's many things that we need to discover to understand. Yes, some people get terrified because of the possibilities of this and so on. But I definitely think that we should look at the positives of it too, and which I'm sure like they're great. So the same, like, I like to say, like, when the car came around and there were people still with carriages and horses, they were like, no, this is not a good thing. I have a horse and I walk and I do this, and yeah, sure, it takes me longer, but that's more expensive and so on. But look at cars now today, right? So they definitely took over the world at that point, right? And so on. So the same with AI probably. Now it'll be like, yeah, but they're not that good, but they can do this, they can do that, Sure, we'll get better at making them better and so on. So hopefully in the future, this will bring us lots of benefits,
Very true. Second part of the question was, how do we think as practitioners of, cloud magic, as it were, what people could be perceived as cloud magic, but practitioners of cloud design implementation? How do you feel about AI coming into your job space? Is it a net positive? Is it a net negative? Are you excited? Are you concerned? What are your personal thoughts on that?
I mean, I do read news and everything develops so quick. And, there are people saying that it's going to replace us as, like engineers, software developers or whatever and stuff. However, I'm a bit skeptical to that. Like I still see AI as a very, very good thing. However, it still has a long way to go. One thing that I like about it is that, AI will help us get through things that we find them very manual, very time consuming. It will get us to go through those things very quickly, like looking through documents, summarize, translate, and all this kind of stuff. And sure, it will, let's say, eliminate some of like our capabilities, like 30% to 50%, whatever you call it. However, the rest of 50%, we can exploit that tenfold, right? Whatever we have left when it comes to human interactions, when it comes to design thinking, when it comes to all this kind of stuff, humans for now is just better at that because we add things to it, right? So I feel like it will definitely take some capabilities, but at the same time, we can leverage the capabilities that we have much greater because we can do things so much quicker now, so much better, so more efficient and so on. So I see it as a positive. I see it more as a tool, right? So I don't think we should look at it as a source of information. Sure, you can ask him something to do and then, he might provide you a good answer or a wrong answer, right? We got that kind of stuff, but you should not fully trust it. You should just because you need to understand what you're asking to do. You need to understand what he gives you back and how do you integrate that into the problem that you got, right? And even if it gives you the full answer, you should still double check, kind of make like your own homework because, AI make mistake. Humans make mistake too. Like I can ask an engineer to do something and he can make a mistake. And, but sometimes, we just kind of tend to see it as a perfect machine that never makes mistakes. And whenever we ask him something, he'll be like, yeah, but it's not good and so on. We still should use it more as a tool, not a source of information and just take whatever it says 100% granted and stuff. But it will definitely help us accelerate our productivity. They're already doing things through automations, through things that, like, I was actually playing with some automation stuff, and I could automate, let's say, a LinkedIn post, or I can do some sort of different automations with it that can help my day-to-day life, and can, instead of me taking an hour to do that, I can do it in 15 minutes and so on, right? So with the rest 45 minutes, I can spend it somewhere else. And so it definitely gives us some leverage to use more our time and think of something better to do with that. So yeah.
That's really well put. I agree with you. I think we'll see a division of labor. So back to some of our earlier conversation points, we were saying some people can, especially the greenfielders, and not always, but more so than the brownfielders, they have the opportunity to mold their application and their workload in the pattern that the cloud services understand and accept. So back to the IKEA chair, it's the chair. You're going to get that chair. You're never going to go to IKEA and order a custom thing. I think AI will be good at building those formulaic modular things because there's very little imagination to it at one level. If you have a service that's going to work with this cloud service or this particular PaaS or SaaS platform, and you design it to interlock there, and AI could come in and say, great, connect the dots, boom, 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 boom. I don't want to say, AI is always going to stay at its current state, but certainly in the short run, the amount of imagination and creativity required to customize things for customers still requires, I think, a human mind. So
Yeah.
yes, AI can create art, even though, picture I just created might have an eyeball in the wrong place or 6 fingers or something. And yes, AI can create music, although in order for it to do so, you have to feed it a lot of other music so it knows the kind of music that you want. In cloud consulting and design are situations where there are no previous patterns,
Yeah.
right? That is where
Yeah.
imagination and creativity in the human mind comes in. So if there's nothing I can stuff into an LLM as a rinse and repeat over and over again and get it to iterate and perfect a pattern, there's no chance for AI to be immediately creative or innovative. And so
Correct.
that immediacy of, wow, this app looks a lot like the other 5 apps that I've designed, but in fact, it's not. Every customer app is always slightly different. There's a nuance because every enterprise is building apps in a slightly different way or format because they need different outcomes. You've got to stay on your toes and say, oof, those previous patterns I use, I get inspiration from them, but I'm going to have to develop an entirely new pattern for this customer.
Correct. Yes.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think that's why, especially in the consulting and design space, AI will be more of a tool because you have to think on your feet. And until AI and LLMs can think on their feet and AI can just come up with innovative new patterns without using an LLM, human creativity should always prevail. At least I hope.
Yeah. And most of the time, like, I'll give you a situation. We go and talk to customers, and sometimes they don't have all the data, about what they want to do or, how they get there. So we will use our experience to extract that kind of information through asking questions and try to lead them to the answer. Sometimes, sure, AI can do that in some sort of way too, but then we have more awareness of things. AI will just be, like pre-trained on some sort of information, but we have so much more awareness on that. I feel like that human interaction right there is so much. It's something that maybe AI cannot replace. I don't know in the future, but for now, for sure, it can't. It's kind of like, we're still in control. We still can do stuff, and it's still us probably who should be in control because, like, as a tool, then we should use it appropriately in the right context. Because sometimes cannot, like, if you use it not in the right context, then it also doesn't provide you good answers and so on. So it has to be there. So, but yeah, I feel like that's still the case where it cannot yet replace, let's say, the tech consultant, I would say, in my opinion. So yeah.
Yeah. And there's the human side of it too, right? A lot of consulting is based on, if I'm not mistaken, trust, forming
Yes.
that bond of trust with your customer because you're going to be touching and configuring some of their most critical apps and services. They've entrusted you to this task and they're going to kind of size you up as a person. Is Daniel trustworthy? Does he know what he's talking about? Does he appear to be an intelligent, sophisticated person that merits this, this kind of work engagement? Of course, the answer is yes, but there is that sanity check, right? That
Yes.
we as
Yeah.
humans do on each other, which is really part of the bond of trust, which really all at the end of the day, I think business really is based on trust.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental blood that flows through the enterprise body. I think learning to trust AI for those kinds of tasks, I don't know. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. But if you can't have a person in a room and go to a whiteboard and have a cup of coffee together, maybe I'm just sounding old fashioned, but I think business is still gonna tick along that way for
Yeah.
quite some time.
I agree.
Yeah. Hey, well, listen, Daniel, we're coming up on that time. This has been super fun. I really appreciate your insight and your thoughtfulness and sharing everything about your job and your company with us. It sounds like a phenomenal place to work. I
It
wish
is.
you the
Yeah.
best of luck and thanks for everything.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Take care.